G'day, Teeth here from pickinglessons.com. Arpeggios on the mandolin. We're going to dive right in, look at the intervals that make an arpeggio, what we can use the arpeggios for. Major and minor, major seventh, minor seventh, dominant seventh. What's the difference? Open position arpeggios and movable arpeggios as well. We've also got this example you heard at the beginning of this lesson where that solo is only using arpeggios. So we'll talk about that and we'll look at different ways of going about it. But firstly, if you head to pickinglessons.com, you're able to get yourself the first part of this worksheet that we're going to be working through that has the common intervals and has the open position, major and minor arpeggios we're going to learn in a moment. Beyond that, we're going to break this down into 4 different parts. So we're learning here in this lesson these intervals and major and minor arpeggios in the open position. But in the next few lessons, we'll take a look at some movable positions, so different arpeggio shapes we can move to any chord position. Also some major and minor sevenths and the dominant seventh arpeggio as well. So 4-note chord extensions that are really common. And we'll also slowly run through that solo example I played at the beginning using just arpeggio notes. Okay, so before we jump into playing some arpeggios, we're going to have a quick look at the intervals found inside these arpeggios. So major thirds, minor thirds, the perfect fifth, the octave, the major seventh and the minor seventh. Knowing how these fit from any root note is really, really cool, because what it means is if you know that you're playing over a C chord and you want to find its major third, we can very quickly do that, understanding how these intervals work. They're inside our arpeggios, they're also inside our chords, same thing. So let's run through these examples. We won't spend too much time here, but we'll just have a quick look at what they sound like and how to play them. So we're going to begin on C on fret 5. Now our major third is 2 whole tones. We can play that on the next string also by using this shape. So that's fret 5, fret 2 here in this example. Remembering that all these are movable, so it doesn't matter where we are, the interval distance is always going to be the same. So major third, minor third sounds like this. It's 1 fret lower, a half tone lower. There's our first fret there on string 3. Same thing, always from this root note here from C in these examples. Again, you can move them anywhere though. Let's move on, perfect fifth. The perfect fifth is the fifth note we find in the scale. We use that in our chords as well. And from C, that would take us up to the G. Now we could play the G up on fret 12, that's the perfect fifth above on the same string, but more conveniently, we can find it underneath there on string 3. The octave, now the octave is just when we find that same C note again up the next octave. So there's a good example there, really easy to find. We're going to skip over to string 2. So there's an octave. We also have an octave there on fret 10 of string 3. Now, jumping into 4-note chords when we get there later in the lesson, we'll be learning about the major and minor sevenths. Now we have these intervals here. Now a major 7 sounds like this. We'll play it in 2 different ways. We can play it here on the second fret on second fret on string 2. Now that's a B note from the C. So that just happens to be the 7th note in the scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, 7th note in the scale. That's a major 7th. Now if we were to move to the adjacent string there, that would take us to fret 9. So it's an interesting sounding interval, the major 7th. The minor 7th is 1 semitone lower. We just flatten it. So we're going to bring that down a semitone. There's our minor 7 interval. Very interesting, very interesting. And we find that in these extended chords we're going to look at later on. So it's worth understanding how these intervals are put together, remembering that we start from the root note, and then we're basically moving up our scale. So when we talk about a major third, it's the 3rd note in the scale. A minor third is the flattened 3rd note from the major scale. So one more time, that C major example, the 3rd note is E, flatten that, E flat. So minor third, major third, minor third, major third. If you have a basic understanding of that, it goes a long way when you're improvising in lots of different styles of music, remembering that we're trying to quote our notes from the chord as we play because they're the strong notes. Understanding how we can tweak these and play around them is really, really cool when you're playing and you're improvising. So there you go, there's all these common intervals we're finding in the arpeggios we're about to learn, just in arpeggios in general and chords in general. But let's put some practical patterns into what we're doing here. Firstly, the open position major arpeggio. Really easy. We're going to play it out of G, use our open G string, and we have these 4 notes we're going to play. Firstly, the G, the B, the D, then the octave, the G. So that's the major arpeggio sound, fits over the G chord. This is a really easy one to move around. When you move to the next string, the D, play the same pattern. That's the great thing about mandolin. Once you know the patterns, you can shift them anywhere and they're all going to relate. So D is our open string now, our root note. And then the same thing, if we step to the A string, we have an open A arpeggio. So 3 arpeggios, 1 pattern. This pattern's movable, we'll talk about that later on. Now to take that same arpeggio but turn it into a minor arpeggio instead, so taking that same pattern but just tweaking a little bit, we're going to turn it into a minor arpeggio. So G minor, low G. This time we have a flat 3. So it's a different interval to kick us off. We still have the perfect 5th and we still have the octave. So the octave and the perfect 5th, but the minor 3rd is in there now. So G minor, G major, G minor. So you can hear the difference. It's quite clear that one's major, one's minor. It's the 3rd. The major 3rd for the major arpeggio, the minor 3rd for the minor. You need this really basic understanding of your chords because these are really the building blocks of all the harmony that you ever play. If we move on, this pattern also moves down the string like the other major arpeggio did. So we go to string 3, the D string, playing the minor arpeggio now, to the major, the minor with the flat 3, the minor 3rd. And again, stepping to the A string, we can play an A minor. So the A minor arpeggio, A major, A minor. So open position arpeggios are relatively straightforward, but we play in those keys a lot. So understanding the open position of these arpeggios is important. So what about other keys? For example, C or F or B flat. We can use movable shapes and we will learn those in the next lesson. So if you head over to pickandlessons.com, you have to get yourself, firstly, the chart that we just worked on. Grab it there, it's a free download. Secondly, the next part of this lesson, we're going to break down closed position major and minor arpeggios, closed position major 7ths, minor 7ths, and dominant 7th arpeggios. We'll also break down that example from the beginning of this lesson. You'll also have the chart that backs all that up as well. So pickandlessons.com, I'll see you there.